the real Santa Claus. Nicholas was born around the year 270 in the coastal city of Patara, in the ancient region of Lycia, now southern Turkey. Patara wasn't a quiet fishing village. It was a strategic Mediterranean port, a trading hub where Roman merchants, sailors, and travelers constantly moved goods, stories, and cultures. It was a place shaped by wealth and instability, prosperity and plague. It was into this world that Nicholas entered, an only child, born to wealthy, devout Christian parents. His early life was defined by something few children of his age experienced, the shadow of disease. A plague swept through Patara, claiming the lives of countless people, including both of Nicholas's parents. Before he was old enough to fully understand mortality, he inherited a significant fortune and the kind of trauma that molds a life. He was raised by an uncle who served as a priest, and from the beginning, Nicholas was marked by seriousness and intensity that people took note of. Even as a child, he showed a strict moral discipline, fasting, praying, and keeping routines that would challenge most adults. By the time he reached young adulthood, people weren't asking if he would enter the clergy. They were waiting for him to choose when. The most famous story of Nicholas's early life is in Dowry Miracle, but behind the similar narrative lies a brutal slice of ancient reality. In the Roman world, a woman without a dowry had few options. Poverty didn't just mean hardship, it meant vulnerability to exploitation, servitude, or being sold into prostitution. In Patara lived a man who had once been wealthy, but had lost everything, with 3 daughters and no dowries. He faced the unthinkable. Nicholas heard of their situation and quietly decided to act. He didn't want praise, recognition, or political leverage. He wanted anonymity. So he moved through the night, carrying a bag of gold, and he tossed it through the window of their home, disappearing before dawn.
This is a miracle, but this will only be enough to save one of my daughters from servitude.
The father was stunned. It was enough for his eldest daughter to marry and escape the worst Roman poverty. But the next night it happened again. Another bag of gold for the second daughter. Finally, on the third night, the father stayed awake, determined to discover their benefactor. When Nicholas approached, the man fell to his knees in gratitude. Nicholas told him to stand, insisting that the gift must remain a secret. That secrecy would become a defining pattern of his life. This wasn't a myth about generosity. It was a window into Nicholas's psychology. A man who wanted to do good, even dangerous good, without reward. Nicholas's life changed permanently when he traveled to Myra, one of Lycia's largest cities. Myra was politically influential, a regional Roman center with temples, markets, and a growing Christian population living under fluctuating tolerance from the empire. When the previous bishop died, clergy in the city sought divine guidance on choosing a successor. The story preserved by early Christian writers says that one elder had a dream instructing him to appoint the first man who entered the church the following morning. Nicholas, known for rising early to pray, walked through those doors at dawn. When asked his name, he answered simply, Nicholas.
My name is Nicholas. How may I be of service, Father?
That was enough. In their eyes, God had chosen him. And practically overnight, he became the spiritual leader of one of the region's most important Christian communities. His reputation for discipline and charity soon blended with political weight. Bishops weren't religious figures. They were advocates, negotiators, diplomats. And Nicholas stepped into that role fully. Nicholas's early years as a bishop were marked by the brutality of the Diocletian persecution. Out of Rome's many campaigns against Christians, this one was the most systematic and violent. Churches were destroyed, scriptures burned, clergy imprisoned, bishops were singled out to break the movement at its source. Nicholas was arrested, stripped of his status, and imprisoned with other clergy. Roman prisons were not designed to hold high-ranking intellectuals. They were pits, filthy, overcrowded, and often deadly. Prisoners starved. Torture wasn't exceptional. It was a standard procedure, and yet Nicholas endured. Stories from this period describe him comforting other prisoners, praying constantly, and refusing to compromise his beliefs, even when compromise meant survival. When Constantine eventually legalized Christianity and ordered the release of prisoners, Nicholas walked out of confinement physically weakened, but spiritually unbroken. Surviving Roman persecution wasn't just an event, it shaped every decision he made afterward. It hardened him, sharpened him, and gave him the authority of a man who had suffered of these principles. The years after Constantine's rise marked the transition from Nicholas the bishop to Nicholas the legend. One of these earliest stories describes three men who had been falsely accused and were moments away from execution. Nicholas, learning the injustice, rushed to the site. He stepped between the executioner and the condemned, seized the executioner's blade, and turned on the officials who arranged the wrongful sentence. This wasn't a symbolic intervention. This was a bishop physically stopping a state-sponsored killing. Another story preserved in the maritime tradition involves a group of sailors caught in a brutal storm. They prayed for Nicholas to intercede, and early accounts claim that he appeared, either in a vision, or as some sources say, physically, guiding them to safety. The city of Myra was a major port. Sailors passed through constantly. They returned home, telling stories of the bishop who protected them, and over time, Nicholas became the patron saint of sailors across the Mediterranean. And then there's the most controversial story, the resurrection of three children who had been brutally murdered and preserved in a barrel by a tavern keeper. Early versions of this legend were meant to highlight Nicholas's compassion for the vulnerable, but with time it transformed into one of the most iconic and supernatural tales associated with him. Whether these stories are literal or symbolic, they demonstrate how Nicholas was perceived, not simply as a bishop, but as a defender of the innocent, a protector of the powerless, and a challenger of corruption. In 325 AD, Emperor Constantine called together one of the most important councils in Christian history, Nicaea. Over 300 bishops gathered to debate the core theological issues, most notably the teachings of Arius, who argued Christ was created rather than eternal. Nicholas attended as the Bishop of Myra, and he entered a debate that was fracturing the early church. Accounts written centuries later claim that Nicholas became so outraged at Arius' argument that he crossed the room and struck him.
You have defiled the name of our Lord!
Whether it was a slap or a punch varies by the retelling, but Santa Claus literally punched a man. Tradition from the church says he was punished by having his bishop's garments and gospel book confiscated until he repented, but legends add that Christ and Mary appeared to other bishops in dreams, restoring Nicholas's authority and vindicating him. If these events happened literally or metaphorically, the story reflects how Nicholas was understood. A man unwilling to tolerate compromise on essential truths, even when diplomacy was expected. Nicholas spent the rest of his life leading the church in Myra with a combination of strict discipline and unwavering charity. He was known for intervening in legal disputes, helping the poor discreetly, comforting families affected by the famine, and using his influence to mediate conflicts. His reputation grew so widely that pilgrims traveled from far beyond Lycia simply to hear him preach. He died on December 6th, around 343 AD. The date of his passing quickly became a feast day across the Christian world. Within decades, stories of his generosity and courage spread across the Mediterranean, up into Europe, and into every region touched by Christian culture. After Nicholas's death, Myra became a pilgrimage site, but centuries later, in 1807, as Turkish armies advanced into Anatolia, sailors from the Italian city of Bari saw an opportunity, or a justification, to secure Nicholas's remains before they could be destroyed or seized. They broke into his tomb, took most of his bones, placed them in a barrel, and smuggled them back to Italy. The people of Bari celebrated their arrival as a sacred rescue mission. Meanwhile, Myra called it theft. That disagreement still exists today. But in Bari, a new basilica was built to house the relics, and miracles were soon reported just as soon as they had been in Myra. This event transformed Nicholas into a major Western saint, increasing his influence across Europe. As centuries passed, stories of Nicholas evolved. In Northern Europe, he became the patron saint of children. In the Netherlands, he became Sinterklaas, a gift giver who arrived early in winter. Dutch settlers brought Sinterklaas to America, where the name softened into Santa Claus. Writers of the 19th century, Washington Irving, Clement Clark Moore, and Thomas Nast, reshaped him into a figure recognizable today, jolly, red-robed, riding through the snow. The transformation from aesthetic bishop to cheerful holiday icon is one of the strangest cultural evolutionary stories in history. But the core symbolism remained: generosity, protection, justice, compassion. The real Santa Claus wasn't a myth, nor a marketing creation, nor a harmless winter character. He was a man who lived through a plague, persecution, political turmoil, and moral crisis. A man who gave quietly in the dark, confronted injustices boldly in daylight, and became a legend to sailors, merchants, prisoners, families, and children across continents. His life wasn't soft. It wasn't whimsical. It was intense, unpredictable, and profoundly human. And maybe that's why his story survived. Because behind every legend, there's always a person. And behind the modern image of Santa Claus stands Nicholas of Myra, a man whose real life was more dramatic than any myth that followed.